The relentless Alaskan winter had a way of stripping everything down to its bare essence. For Elias Vance, it was the essence of solitude he craved. A mountain man in his late 30s, with a beard thick as a winter coat, and eyes that held the quiet wisdom of 1,000 solitary sunsets, Elias had just bought a small cabin on the outskirts of Skagway. He'd come seeking a new beginning, a place where the ghosts of his past couldn't follow. The air bit at his exposed skin as he trudged through the snow, the weight of his supplies a familiar ache on his shoulders. The cabin was a simple log structure, nestled precariously on a slope overlooking a frozen river. It was an old place, the previous owner, a prospector named Silas, having passed away recently. Elias was told it was a good deal, a place to start over. He hadn't expected to find it occupied. He saw the trail of smoke first, a thin, wavering line against the grey sky. A sense of unease settled in his gut. As he approached, the door creaked open slightly in the wind. He pushed it, the cold air rushing in to meet a wave of stagnant, feverish warmth. The interior was dim, lit only by the sputtering flames of a small cast-iron stove. And then he saw her. She was huddled on a cot by the fire, a frail wisp of a woman, her face pale and clammy, her eyes closed. He saw the sweat on her brow, the raggedness of her breathing. He moved closer, his heavy boots crunching on the dusty floorboards. Her eyes fluttered open, dark and hollow, filled with a pain he couldn't comprehend. "Who are you?" she rasped, her voice a dry whisper. "Elias Vance. I bought this cabin," he said, his voice a low rumble. He gestured to the deed in his pocket. A ghost of a bitter smile touched her lips. "Then you've come for your prize." She coughed, a deep, rattling sound that shook her thin frame. "Just let me die tonight. You'll have the place to yourself soon enough." He paused, a flicker of something in his stern gaze. Elias was a man who lived by a simple code: respect the land, respect the animals, and respect life. He couldn't just leave her. He knelt beside the cot, reaching out to feel her forehead. It was burning hot. "You're sick," he stated, a fact more than an observation. Her name was Elara, and she was the widow of the cabin's previous owner, Silas. She had fallen ill after his death, a fever gripping her so tightly she could barely move. She had nothing left, no family, no friends, and no desire to fight. Elias, against his own nature, couldn't turn away. He set about building up the fire, making a broth from his meager supplies, and tending to her with a quiet, efficient grace that belied his rugged exterior. He learned her story in fragmented whispers over the next few days. Her husband, Silas, had been a kind but sickly man, and their marriage was one of quiet companionship, not fiery passion. They had come to Alaska with a dream that had slowly died, leaving Elara alone with nothing but debt and a cabin in the wilderness. The fever had simply been the final, merciful blow. Elias wasn't a doctor, but he knew the wilderness. He boiled water, soaked rags, and fed her spoonfuls of broth. He spoke little, his actions speaking for him. He was a rock in the storm, his presence a quiet, unshakable comfort. Elara, who had prepared to meet her end, found herself clinging to life, not for herself, but for the strange man who wouldn't let her go. She saw the kindness in his eyes, a depth of compassion she hadn't expected. As the days turned into a week, the fever broke. Elara was weak, but she was alive. The ghosts of her past, the despair and the grief, were still there. But now she saw something new. She saw the way Elias chopped wood, the steady rhythm of his axe, the way he mended a broken chair with practiced hands, and the way he looked at her, not with pity, but with a quiet understanding. "Why?" She finally asked him one evening, her voice still hoarse. "Why didn't you just leave me?" Elias didn't look up from the leather he was mending. "The land provides if you're patient," he said. "Life is a part of that. It's not something you just throw away." He had saved her life, but he hadn't yet saved her from herself. The real struggle was just beginning. It was a fight to convince a woman who had lost everything that there was still something left to live for. As the first chapter of their shared life closed, a new, fragile bond was beginning to form, one born not of words, but of quiet compassion and the raw, unyielding landscape of Alaska. If you're enjoying this story, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the rest of Elara and Elias's journey. As the deep freeze of winter began its slow, reluctant thaw, so too did the ice around Elara's heart. The silence in the cabin, once suffocating, was now filled with the gentle rhythm of two lives coexisting. Elias worked outside, his presence a constant, reassuring anchor. Elara, gaining her strength, began to help where she could, mending clothes and preparing meals. Their conversations were brief, yet they conveyed more than lengthy speeches. They were a pair of weathered souls, each with their own grief, finding an unspoken solace in the other's company. The first major challenge came with the spring thaw. The river began to swell, and the old cabin, built precariously close to the bank, began to show its age. The floorboards creaked underfoot, and a persistent leak appeared in the roof. Elias, a man of action, set about repairing the damage. But Elara saw the fatigue in his eyes, the subtle clench of his jaw as he worked. She knew what she had to do. She approached him one evening, a small, worn leather pouch in her hands. "This was my husband's," she said, her voice soft. "He told me it was all he had left from his prospecting days. I never opened it." Elias took the pouch and untied the string. Inside, nestled among a few tarnished coins, was a small, crudely carved wooden bird. He held it in his palm, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What is this?" he asked. "He said he traded it from an old trapper long ago, said it would bring luck, but it never did." She looked away, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I always thought he was a dreamer, that he was trying to hide how little we had." Elias, with his experience in the wilderness, saw something else. He ran his calloused thumb over the bird's smooth surface. He saw the distinctive grain of old wood, the fine craftsmanship, and an almost imperceptible marking on the bottom. It wasn't just a trinket. He believed it was a marker, a map of some kind. He took Elara's hand. "This isn't a trinket. It's a key." He spent the next few days poring over old maps, talking to the few remaining prospectors in town. He learned about an old legend, a miner who long ago had carved such birds to mark his secret lucrative gold finds. The markings on the bird were a code, a trail to a hidden claim. Silas, Elara's husband, had not been a dreamer, but a man who had stumbled upon a forgotten treasure map. The discovery was a turning point. It wasn't just about the gold, it was about the truth. It revealed that Silas, a man she had thought of as a failure, a man whose death had left her with nothing, had a secret, hidden side. Elara's sorrow began to shift, replaced by a quiet sense of purpose. She wasn't just a victim of circumstance anymore. She had a role to play. They worked together, Elias guiding the way, Elara poring over the maps. Their shared purpose broke down the last of the walls between them. They argued about the best route, laughed at their own foolishness when they hit a dead end, and shared quiet moments of reflection under the vast Alaskan sky. Elias found himself sharing stories of his own past, of a family he had lost, of a life he had been running from, and Elara, in turn, confessed her fear, her grief, and her hope. The journey wasn't easy. The weather was unpredictable, and the terrain was treacherous. They faced swollen rivers, difficult climbs, and the ever-present threat of a sudden storm. But they faced it together, a team. Elias relied on Elara's intuition, her sharp memory for the map's details, and Elara found strength in Elias's unwavering determination. One afternoon, as a light rain began to fall, they found it. A small, almost invisible crevice in the rocks, hidden behind a waterfall. The wooden bird led them there, its markings now a clear guide. And inside, they found not a fortune, but a small cache of valuable gold nuggets, enough to not only repair the cabin, but to start a new life. The gold was the least of it. The real treasure was what they had found in each other, a sense of belonging, of purpose, and a bond forged in adversity. They had faced the wilderness, both outside and within, and they had come out stronger. They had transformed the grief and despair of a sick widow and a lonely mountain man into something beautiful and real. Their pasts were no longer a burden. They were the foundation for a shared future. Don't miss the final chapter of this emotional journey. Make sure you're subscribed and have the notification bell on. The gold they found wasn't a king's ransom, but it was enough. It was enough to mend the cabin properly, to buy supplies, to ensure a comfortable future. Elias used the money to hire help, to rebuild the parts of the cabin that were crumbling, and to fortify it against the harsh winters to come. Elara, with her newfound strength and purpose, helped him, her movements now filled with a quiet confidence that was a stark contrast to the frail woman he had found. The real transformation wasn't in the cabin, it was in their relationship. The lines between owner and occupant had blurred into a partnership. They worked side by side, sharing meals, quiet conversations, and the simple comfort of each other's presence. The wilderness, once a symbol of Elias's solitude, had become the setting for their shared life. He had found a companion, and she a home. One afternoon, as the first signs of autumn painted the trees in hues of gold and crimson, Elara stood by the window, watching Elias chop wood. The rhythmic thud of his axe was a familiar sound, a promise of warmth and security. She turned to him as he came inside, his face flushed from the cold. "I was wrong," she said, her voice clear and strong. He stopped, his gaze questioning. "About what?" "I wasn't a failure," she said, her eyes meeting his. "I was just lost, and you found me." He set the axe down, his heart thudding in his chest. "We found each other," he corrected, his voice low. The romance that had been a slow, quiet burn now found its voice. It wasn't born of grand gestures or passionate declarations, but of shared struggles and mutual respect. He took her hands in his, their calloused palms meeting, a testament to the lives they had led and the hardships they had overcome. "This is a new beginning," she whispered, her eyes filled with a hope she had forgotten she could feel. "It is," he agreed, his thumb stroking the back of her hand. The promise was unstated, yet understood. They would face the future together. The cabin, once a symbol of Silas's failed dream and Elara's despair, was now their home, a sanctuary built not just of wood and stone, but of trust and affection. Months passed. The deep winter returned, but this time the cabin was a fortress against the cold. The stove glowed with a constant comforting heat, and the walls held the warmth of their shared lives. Elias and Elara were no longer just a mountain man and a sick widow. They were a couple, their story woven into the very fabric of the Alaskan wilderness. The ending wasn't a fairy tale. Life in Alaska was still hard, filled with its own unique challenges. But they were no longer alone. They had each other and the quiet promise of a new life. Elias had come to the mountains to find solitude, but he had found something far more precious: companionship. Elara had asked to die, but she had been given a reason to live. Their story was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a narrative not of magic or miracles, but of compassion, resilience, and the slow, beautiful blooming of love in the most unexpected of places. They had faced the darkness, both within and without, and had found their way back to the light together. And as the snow fell softly outside, blanketing the land in a pristine white, a new chapter of their lives began, a quiet, simple, and profound promise of tomorrow. Thank you for watching. If you were moved by Elias and Elara's story, please hit that like button, leave a comment, and share this video with your friends. We'll see you next time.